The other day, James Martin, he published an article in the American magazine called Pope Francis Never Stopped Being a Jesuit. And he just mentions that I'm just reading it out for you. In 2005, a few days before the conclave that elected Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger as Pope, I was having breakfast in my Jesuit community. At the table was a Jesuit who had retired after working in Rome for many years. On that day, the New York Times ran a story that included a list of papal electors, the cardinals who would soon travel to Rome to elect a pope. After one of the names was the initials S.J., which meant this cardinal was a Jesuit. But the name was unfamiliar to me, so I said innocently, "Who is Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina?" My fellow Jesuit's face darkened and said, "Oh, he would be terrible." He explained that Cardinal Bergoglio had been a Jesuit provincial, that is, regional superior, at a young age, and was so divisive that he virtually split the Argentinian province into two camps, pro-Bergoglio and anti-Bergoglio. Terrible, he said again. A few days later, Cardinal Ratzinger was elected and took the name Pope Benedict. I forgot about Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Several years later, I was helping a news program during the next conclave when the white smoke flowed up from the Sistine Chapel. Shortly afterward, the Camerlengo announced the name of the next pope, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. All I could remember was my friend's comment, "Terrible." Some Jesuits assumed that the newly elected pope was a disgruntled former Jesuit who would be intent on reforming the Society of Jesus. So that is the kind of the story, the inside commentary or story that was happening in the Jesuits between the conclave of 2005 and 2013. And when after I was reading this, I recalled in the book that Austin Ivory wrote on the Great Reformer, the kind of biography of the Pope, where he mentions that Pope Francis had been estranged from the Jesuits since 1992 to 2013. And I thought to myself, gosh, 21 years where you have no contact with your former community. You're not invited to a dinner or a retreat or give a talk. There probably was contact because as Archbishop, there had to be some type of communication. But to be virtually estranged, not to be welcomed, according to reports, he wasn't welcomed in Jesuit residences. And I suppose when I'm listening to this commentary, about internal commentary that the Jesuits are having about Bergoglio, I was there asking, well, who was Jorge Maria Bergoglio, Pope Benedict? There never has been, since he became Pope, kind of this solid understanding of what his thinking was before he was Pope. For example, when John Paul II became Pope, he was this giant intellectual, lecturer, archbishop, cardinal, well known in Poland, and well welcomed back to Poland. But in Krakow and in Lublin and other places, he was much admired, much loved. And, with Pope Francis being a Jesuit, you would think he was novice master, that some of his former novices would come out and speak about him. Not one. Or you would hear something from the Jesuits that lived with him would come out and speak about him. Nothing. Which is very strange. I was a novice for 2 years, from 1991 to 1993 in the Legions of Christ. And we had the same novice master, Father Guillermo Meath, at the time, and those who were with me will remember. And he was one of the most amazing people that I will ever remember. Very caring, and definitely wanted the best for us. Challenged us, but he wanted the best for us, and brought us around France, Switzerland, Italy, Cluny, Coudars, and Paray-le-Monial, Switzerland. We were renovating out there a school, and around Italy. I mean, I will remember those 2 years for the rest of my life, and a very positive experience. Actually, when everything became known about Father Marcial in 2009, he was the first priest I called just to, really commiserate a little bit about what they were going through. But again, if he ever became Pope, I would sing his praises, because it was truly a positive experience for me. Others might say other things, but that's it. But I think any of the rest of us that were there with him, and I've spoken to others, we had a positive experience. But Jorge Bergoglio, after he was ordained, was novice master. Not a single video, not a single testimony, nothing. It's just like silence. The same with when he was provincial superior. We don't have any information about, anybody come out and say, well, he was a great spiritual father for us, and we learned something from him, and he challenged us. No, it's all we have is actually negative. You have the whole Culvenbach report that the Jesuits wrote before he was created bishop, was all negative. He was a liar. He swore. I mean, this is what the Jesuits internally were saying. So I'm just relaying the information that the Jesuits themselves relayed. You have it in the Culvenbach report. You have it in James Martin's article here. You have it in the biography that Austin Ivory. If you read all of these things and put them together, it's like a jigsaw, trying to understand Jorge Maria Bergoglio's Pope Francis pass. It's like a jigsaw, trying to put a piece together. And everybody's different, but with John Paul II, it wasn't difficult to put together, because it was all there in Lublin and Krakow. The people that he knew, the places he would go to, Zakopane, would go hiking or skiing or canoeing or camping and stuff like this. The people that knew him, you have a wealth of letters, of literature, of poetry, plays, and everything that he wrote. We can see in the doctoral thesis, and the philosophy that John Paul II studied and wrote and lectured about. With Jorge Bergoglio, it's very hard to put that jigsaw puzzle together. Starting in the late 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And, he gets rehabilitated as a Jesuit Pope in 2013. But, how Jesuit really can you be if you're estranged from your own community? And I ask these questions because, this is important to understand because we need a leader in the church now that can actually unite, that actually has a track record of working consistently to build unity and to lead us to Christ. A spiritual leader, a man with union with God. We need one of those. And I can't see that having happened with the Pope when he was novice master, provincial superior in the 1980s. It's just, there's too many questions. And then we're constantly being told, no, he was poor. He had his own apartment in Buenos Aires. He didn't want to live in the bishop's palace. Sometimes people don't want to live there for other reasons. I'm not creating an excuse here. I'm just saying, okay, you have living quarters paid for, part of the church property, and you buy extra property, to be clear, an extra apartment. And you say, this is poor, because I want to live in this way. Okay, well, you might want to do that, but do you understand that that's an extra expense? Or in the Vatican, we're being told to know he was poor because he lived in Casa Santa Marta. He didn't live in the opulent papal palace apartment. Hold on a second. Well, the papal apartments aren't opulent and they're not super luxurious. So he had extended his living quarters. But I ask these questions because when somebody tries to convince you so much of their virtue, I'm just saying, but I don't understand what you're doing to me here. No? Because he is the media's darling. Pope Francis is the liberal media's darling, which is really interesting. So we would have tons of converts. Whoopi Goldberg will be converted and she'll become Catholic, and all of these, like, they cherry pick what they like from him. Again, I'm trying to grapple with who he was, and trying to give him the best picture to try and understand who he was. You know, it's interesting. It's a fascinating legacy to have. He's a very difficult person really to understand. You know, there was one commentary where they have a Jesuit interviewing Pope Francis, and he says to them, the interviewer, I think he was the cardinal in Hong Kong. I'm not sure, but a Jesuit was interviewing Pope Francis not too long ago, and he asked him, "What would you say to those who want to become Jesuits?" And he says, "Become a Dominican." And people laughed it off as just humor. I think he was deadly serious. I think it was one of the things that Pope Francis actually said, which was actually true. But again, I'd love to see somebody. I'd love to see his legacy in the 1970s and 80s properly studied. You know, who was he? Who was he? You know, who was a spiritual master? Who was a spiritual director? Who, you know, because his legacy isn't lauded within the Jesuits. And Jesuit became, in reality, the Black Pope. And, you know, if people understand, the Black Pope is the head of the Jesuits. That's the colloquial term for the head of the Jesuits, is the Black Pope, black cassock. He had so much power that they called him the Black Pope. But the Jesuits also took a vow to the Pope, and so as Jesuit, Pope Francis, in effect, I mean, the Jesuits are all vowed to a Jesuit, so he in effect became not only the Pope but also the Black Pope in the amount of, you know, the power that he had. And it's strange because, you know, you have a Jesuit that is estranged from his own order, divided his own order in Argentina. You know, it's, if you read between the lines, a lot of questions come back. I mean, he talks about receiving counseling or treatment or going to a psychologist. He speaks about this. And we are told that this is because of the problems during the dictatorship and stuff like that. But you know, it's you would question, why was he put into such a position and who put him there if he wasn't able to govern properly. But it seems like as he governed in the Jesuits, he governed in the church. He said, I'm doing it my way. This is my plan. And that's fine. But when you alienate some of your own church to such an extent that they won't listen to you, they won't read anything. I know Catholics that never read anything that Pope Francis published as his pontificate advanced. Nothing. That's a sad reality. You know, especially when I remember under John Paul II, anything that he published, we would read it. And some of the stuff, it's not, it might be very intellectual, but other was profoundly beautiful. I still have a lot of John Paul II's books. I have them in Polish in my own library, and I would treasure them. And of course, we were able to meet him and know his thought. I mean, would the real Pope Francis stand up here? Which is the person that we? Because you always second guessing. Did I understand this man correctly when he was alive? You know, did I understand exactly who he was? You're always trying, and I suppose you have to understand from my point of view. I'm always going to be second guessing these things, having been burnt by placing faith in so-called saints that didn't turn out to be saints. But there are saints out there. There are men. There are truly men that have done the path to union with God. Was Pope Francis one of them? I suppose it's going to be hard to understand. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments about this, but I'm just kind of putting together the different strands of information, his biography, the Jesuits discussion, the Coldenbach report, conversations, and who was Pope Francis? Exactly. Was he this incredibly virtuous, poor man that they're trying to take out, that was always, or was he atoning for something in his life? I don't know. God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.